The path to spiritual cleansing, like the path of conquest, is not one of idleness. And Yagbu Tatus Pecheneg, the one-armed Khan, began his great pilgrimage not as a penient monk, but as the king he was. And he sought the favor of the eternal blue sky in hopes of healing the pain that tremors through his limbs. He was pragmatic. While his caravan moved towards various holy sites and traveling, he dispatched his raiders along the borders and ensured his journey was funded by the spoils of his neighboring lords. He would do what was necessary for both his soul and his kingdom. The journey was that of a long one, a procession befitting of a Khan. And it was on this journey that word reached him yet of the birth of another daughter, another branch on the tree he had so determined to nurture. His journey would lead him to the greatest city to known man, the legendary Constantinople. He and his retinue would marvel at its golden domes and colossal walls, a world away from the felt yurts of the steppes. However, it felt constrained and contrived. The visit was profitable, an influx of gold filling his coffers, but the city was a waypoint on his spiritual quest. He sought to learn of the famous walls, of what the greatest of mankind has to offer as a way away from his yurts. But one evening, as his camp settled by a fire, Tatus felt the pull to walk to the edge of a nearby woods. And it was there he saw a lone roe deer, magnificent and proud. And Tatus, of course, ever the hunter, moved with a quiet grace, staying far enough behind so as not to startle the creature. He would follow it for some time, a silent observer in its world, and eventually the deer would meet another of its kind. And for a moment, the two proud animals would butt heads. A brief, intense display of dominance and strength, but the aggression was fleeting. And soon the clashing of antlers gave way to a gentle nuzzling, an acceptance of mutual respect before they disappeared together in the twilight of the wilderness. And Tatus would stand frozen, the image burned into his mind, for he too had an antagonist, a rival born from an act of aggression. An 8-year-old boy who had sworn vengeance upon him. But in the nuzzling of the stags, Tatus did not see weakness, and he saw wisdom. He saw the futility of pointless conflict, and what was to be gained from a feud with a child who could do nothing to him. And it was a distraction. It was unnecessary. And upon his return to the camp, he would speak to his advisors. The rivalry with the boy, it is done. That is a waste of thought and energy. Why should I direct my anger towards him when his own father raised against me? Let us offer him a gift of penance in hopes of quelling his petty tantrums and possibly peace trade in securing his loyalty, since he cannot act against me. Tatus did what was necessary. Trading feuds for prestige, the pilgrimage would continue, and with many it came other strange encounters. He would acquire books of knowledge and would spend his time negotiating obedience from arrogant vassals. But of course, the man who he tried, his pride was too great, and Tatus' own dread was not enough to convert. Some other events that occurred were that he learned his spy master would later contract the measles and was likely doomed as he was out on his pilgrimage. And always he would ponder the ways of his prisoners that he captured from the last war. Legitimacy. My Khan, this man, He has the means, no means to pay what you need, but we could gain more legitimacy from releasing him. I have no need to strengthen my reign. Killing him would gain me nothing, and he will stay in there until he pays me my 100 dinars. It is but the principle. It is what is necessary. And eventually, after months of travel, Tatus would arrive at one of the most sacred Tengri sites, in a wide swept plateau where a great stone plaque, centuries old, what stood as a testament to the faith, and a crowd of pilgrims and local shamans was gathered around it, arguing over the meaning of the ancient weathered script. The inscriptions clearly speak of a sky of fire, awaiting a punishment for the unworthy. No! The symbol is one of sacrifice. It demands a gift of gold. Tatus would observe the debate from the edge of the crowd, his eyes keen scanning the ancient text, and he saw their confusion. He also saw something that they had all missed. And he moved forward calmly, the crowd parting for the one-armed Khan. His voice, of course, was not loud, but it cut through the chatter. And with his one good hand, he would point to a specific character on the plaque. You are all mistaken. Your debate is based on a flawed character. Look here. He would trace the symbol, the points, to a minuscule, almost unnoticeable imperfection in the carving. This is not the symbol for fire or sacrifice. It is an archaic word for the word passion or fervor. The carver made an error, a spelling mistake ages ago. The line is meant to be read, the sky rewards not the wealthy, but the passionate. It is a call to zeal, not a demand for tribute. A stunned silence would fall over the crowd, and the shamans would squint at the plaque and then at Tatus, their expression shifting from dismissiveness to awe, and murmurs would ripple amongst the pilgrim as they realized the truth in his words. The one-armed Khan had seen what most learned men had missed. And in that moment, Tatus became more than a king. He became a scholar. He had completed his pilgrimage, and while the spirits had not granted him the title of wise man as he had expected, he had forged a new kind of authority with his own sharp mind. He returned home not with a mystical blessing, but with something perhaps more valuable, a reputation for wisdom and a deep intellectual connection to the Tengri. It was a renown he would soon put to use, and a weapon in his arsenal as he entered the final days of his reign. Yagbu Tatus returned from his pilgrimage a changed man. He was no longer just a warlord, but a renowned scholar of the Tengri faith, and a king whose wisdom had been proven before crowds. But a king's reputation does not fill his treasury, and nor does it grant him the authority to demand obedience and respect from his rivals. He found his grandeur had diminished in his absence, and it was above a subtle but significant sign of waning influence. More alarmingly, his personal prestige, the very currency of his power, was low. He was a leader with a new holy era, but without the political might to enact his will, he needed to do what was necessary to restore his standing. He first thought was tradition. For generations, the Khans of the steppe have proven their vitality and gained immense prestige through the organization of a nurge, a grand hunt. Through displays of strength and communion with the spirits of the wilds, Tatus, feeling the weight of his station, gave the order to begin the preparation. The herds are plentiful to the east. We will hold a hunt there. It will be a grand spectacle, a necessary reminder to my vassals and my enemies of the strength of this court. The shaman gaze would shift uncomfortably in its expression grave. He does not meet the Khan's eyes as he begins to speak. My Khan, my Yogbu, it cannot be done. It cannot be done. It cannot be done. I am the Khan, I will it. It is not your will, but the will of the eternal blue sky that concerns me. The faith is clear, my Khan. Nature respects strength and wholeness. A predator that is a wounded doe does not lead the pack on a hunt. For a Khan, a great leader, to preside over a hunt while maimed, it is a terrible omen. It suggests to the spirits that we are weak, flawed. It would be an insult to the prey we seek to honor with the chase. It is forbidden. In an act of ultimate bitter irony, the one-armed Khan, who was celebrated for his understanding of the faith, was trapped by the very same beliefs. In his injury, a symbol of his survival and resilience was seen by the spirits of nature as a mark of imperfection that barred him from the most sacred of kingly traditions. He was caught in a circle of sadness, and he needed prestige to act. But the most honored way to gain it was denied to him precisely because of the battles he had fought to secure the throne. For a moment, Tatus was silent, and the truth of the shaman's words would settle upon his soul. There was no anger, no tantrum. A lesser man would have raged against the injustice, but Tatus simply accepted reality. If one path was blocked, it was necessary to find another. So the sky has spoken. There will be no hunt, and we will find another way. We will hold a tournament and let the warriors of the steppes compete for glory in my name. Their strength will be my strength. Their prestige will be my prestige. And so the Khan's gambit was set, and a grand tournament was announced. A festival of martial skill to be held in the hearts of the Pecheneg lands. It was enormous expense and considerable risk, but it was necessary. He had to build prestige somehow. And as competitors and spectators gathered, the challenges began before the four swords were ever drawn. Unexpected rains would sweep through the region, turning the tournament grounds into a field of mud, threatening to dampen the entire affair. My Khan, the mud will make the melee a dangerous fair. The crowds are miserable. Then move the archery competition to the covered pavilions and have the ground sweepers lay down straw and gravel on the main field and double the ration of drink for the spectators. A wet crowd with a full cup is a happy crowd. Adapt. It is what we do. And no sooner had he solved one problem, another would arise. And a scout would gallop into his camp and report a band of opportunistic bandits, drawn by the news of wealthy gathering, was lurking in the nearby hills plotting raids. Guard captain, take 24 of our best men and ride out to meet them. Do not engage them in a grand battle, simply eradicate them quietly. Your guests need not be troubled by such triviality. Tatus remained the picture of calm control, an unflappable host handling every disruption with ease, and his demeanor ensured the success of the tournament. The competitions were fierce, his own champions fought with valor, and through it all the Khan presided with an air of absolute authority. And his gamble would pay off handsomely. He was granted many new insights into warfare, becoming a real strategist, and his coffers were filled with prestige that he so desperately required. But prestige was not meant to be hoarded, it was meant to be used. For months, while on his pilgrimage and during his return, Tatus's spies had been watching the crumbling kingdom of Hungary, and he had charted its decline and noted its internal strife and waited for the perfect moment of weakness, and very soon that moment would appear. The tournament was a success and my prestige is restored. Hungary is on its knees and their king is incapable. They are mired in the wars and their armies are scattered. This could not be a better opportune moment. He did what was necessary. There was no grand speech and no call to arms. It was a cold move of a predator striking at a wounded animal. My military force is already gathered here at the tournament, and I can declare war while my troops are still out, before they even know they are a target. Send the declaration, I will make them my tributary. And the war for Hungary began as a swift and overwhelming success. But as the Khan's forces pushed deeper, a familiar frustration emerged and a complication from within. His own vassals, again a minor lord from the east, saw this chaotic moment in time as an opportunity for personal gain, and began raiding Tatus's new tributary. The Khan's gambit worked, but the cycle of challenges was never ending, and there was already another conflict to resolve. The war against the collapsing kingdom of Hungary began. As the Tatus calculated, it was swift and overwhelming show of force. His army, fresh from the loyal gains of the tournament, poured across the border, a locust swarm against the weakened crop. Yet as the campaign ground on, the complexities of rule began to fray at the edges of his grand strategy, and a new faction of dissenters began to plot back home. Minor raids from the Byzantines would harass his borders, and in a moment of irony, Tatus, a man with a yurt full of wives, was labeled an adulterer. A complication, of course, he had little time for. And the works of a Khan was constant and exhausting on all fronts. The campaign would reach a critical juncture as Tatus prepared to engage a significant Hungarian force, and his strategist scouts brought dire news. My Khan, the omens are poor. Their numbers on their field are strong, but more than that, their men-at-arms are highly capable, and our scouts suggest we are likely to lose this battle decisively. That is insane. We have more knights and more men. How? Their champions are formidable, my Khan, and our allies. They are entangled on their own wars and cannot come into our aid. It is necessary to seek other aid. I have no choice. Call in the Cumans. Call in my brother. We will need every spear we can get. And it is a dang stain of waste of prestige, but lost we cannot afford to lose now. And so Tatus would call upon his blood brother to ride to his aid. But of course, in this unpredictable chaos of war, his predictions would grow false. And before his allies could arrive, Tatus's army would engage the Hungarians and crush them in a stunningly easy victory. Tatus was left with a bitter taste of a needless decision. And it was through this frustration, or maybe even a moment of overconfidence from the easy victory, that led to Khan to make his final fatal mistake. Instead of directing the rest of the campaign from the safeness of his home, Tatus, for reasons only known to himself, chose to personally oversee the new siege of the holdings in Hungary. He rode to the front lines to the squalor and filth of the siege camp and exposed himself to the common dangers of the regular soldier. Their walls are crumbling, and I want this siege finished by the week's end. We are losing men here every day, if not to arrows, then to the mud and the rot. And as he spoke, a wave of dizziness washed over him. He would stumble, catching himself on a cart, and a sharp, cramping pain grips in his stomach. My guts! It was not a poisoned blade or a warrior's sword that would bring the great Khan low, but camp fever, a terrible and undignified case of dysentery, born from the contaminated waters and grim conditions of the siege line. This conqueror of the steppes, the man who had survived assassins and civil war, was being defeated by a simple tummy ache. And then we go into his final moments. He is pale and sweating and delirious with fever in the field tent. His personal stargazer, his wife, and his personal physician would attend to him. Why am I out here? Why am I in the siege? A fever has taken you, my Khan. You must rest. My Khan. They don't And just like that, Yagbu Tatus Pecheneg, the one-armed Khan, died not in a blaze of glory, but in a feverish haze, and his last words a confused whisper. The news of his death would shatter his army and campaign. The tributary war he was so close to winning was instantly forfeited, and his allies would go back home. His carefully constructed empire would begin to fracture at the seams, and in the chaos, many opportunistic vassals sizable portions of his herd. And then we are forced to witness the 9-year-old son, Abba, playing with his wooden horse. And the yurt's open visor enters and kneels before the child to pass the news. My Khan, your father, Yagbu Tatus Pecheneg, is dead. And the horse would fall from Abba's hands, and he would seem terrified. The son of the one-armed Khan and a boy who has yet to grow into his own name, now inherited a fractured empire, a stolen treasury, and the promise of civil war. For in the east and the west, the lords who had chafed under his father's rule saw their moment. And of course, the independence faction was declared. The armies were already prepared to march. And the saga of Tatus was over. But the trial of Abba just begins.